glad to have you here. I know many of you are getting ready to log on if you haven't not already. We want to say welcome to PMS, Politics, Money, and Social Justice. As you know, we're getting ready for this year election, and what we wanted to do was create an opportunity and a platform to discuss the many different topics that are before us. And so we have a great panelists tonight that will be with us to discuss the matters that are at hand, and we want to make sure that we spend this time as wisely as possible. And so we want to make sure that you know that we're going to end this promptly around about 7:50ish, 7:45, so that you can prepare yourself for the debate tonight, which will be very interesting. And so we want to make sure we use our time wisely. And so what I want to do is introduce our panelists tonight. And so I have to my right, Mr. Sam Johnson, who is a graduate of the University of South Carolina School of Law. He actually worked in the mayor's office with Mayor Steve Benjamin, and he currently serves on numerous boards and works as an advisor for a local firm. We also have Kara Simmons, who is a native of South Carolina and a graduate from Columbia College. She served as a community leader with the Obama Foundation Community Leaders Corporation, and Kara currently serves as an adjunct faculty member, consultant, and community organizer. To my left, we have Tiffany James, who is a graduate of Clemson University. And she worked in 2020 as the South Carolina Black Engagement Director, and she currently is working with a worldwide organization in coronavirus to end coronavirus in the state of South Carolina. And we have joining us Zoom, Mr. Bakari Sellers, who represented South Carolina's 90th district and became the youngest African-American elected official in the country at the age of 22. He is a graduate of Morehouse College and the University School, South Carolina School of Law, and he has received numerous awards and currently serves as an attorney and a political commentator for CNN. And what I want you to do is just in the comment section, I want you to give a shout out to everyone who is here for our discussion tonight. I want to say thank you to all of you for being here. And I look forward to just hearing what this conversation will lead into. And so what we want to talk about tonight is the importance of, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but the next generation of voters. Not just young voters, but the next generation of voters. And so my question I want to start with you, Sam. What are some concerns you think young voters have about this upcoming election?
Sure. I think young voters have the same concerns that a lot of us have right now, right? And I say a lot of us. I don't know where to put myself as far as young. I used to be young. Now I'm getting a little older. But if you're a 21-year-old, I think a lot of them, of course, this year, 2020, has been dominated by healthcare. Folks want to be safe. They want their parents to be safe. They want their siblings, their cousins, those that are also coming behind them to be safe. So I think healthcare, they're worried about their money and their economy. They want to be able to get a job. They want to be able to make sure that they're able to provide and conquer the dreams that they have. And then I think lastly, they care about education. All right, they want to be able to aspire to either conquer and get the education that they're trying to get, that they're searching for, or they want to be able to make sure they're able to move into an environment that has great education, great schools. They may be having children and that sort of thing. They care about economic development and what's coming into the area. So I think those three things are things that they care about.
Great. Bakari, would you like to respond to that question? What do you think of some of the concerns that young voters have in the upcoming election?
Well, I don't know. My twins, as young voters right now, are hollering in the background, so you may hear them. They're 21 months old. But, I don't really have a lot of concerns about young female voters, particularly Black female voters. But I do have a great deal of concern about young male voters, particularly Black male voters. And I think that one of the things that we have to do is begin to treat male voters as swing voters and meet them where they are and begin to message to them to drive them out. Black women have driven the political discourse in our communities as long as we've been in this country. I don't expect that to stop in this election. But I do think that it's necessary that we engage Black men and begin to have serious, substantive conversations with them.
Thank you.
Bakari, with a 4-month-old, I just want to tell you that's music to my ears in the background, brother.
and thank you for sacrificing for being with us here. Kara, I want to ask you a question. What should politicians be doing to probably gain the trust of young voters? I've heard some say that they don't trust the political system. They don't trust politicians. They don't think that their vote counts. What can we do to gain the trust of the next generation of voters?
Being transparent. I think for so long, being a political leader has seemed like such a hard thing to reach, or such a mystical position, when really it's just somebody, or what we see, millennials, we want someone that's going to be transparent, someone that's going to work hard, someone who's going to advocate for us, and someone who's going to listen to us, but also include us and to be a part of the process. And for so long, there have been so many people making decisions and not thinking about us, or they get to a position to where they have arrived and they forgot where they come from and who put them in that position, and they forget about that part. And young people are tired of that, especially my generation. We know we have to work to get where we want to be, but we're tired of the whole kiss in the ring to sit at your table. We'll develop our own.
Well, Tiffany, what do you have to say in response to Kara?
No, Kara is absolutely right. We have to involve our young people, and I guess that includes me. I'm just like Sam. I don't know if I'm young or not anymore. But we have to involve our young people, and most importantly, we have to meet young people where they are. And a lot of times I think when we have these conversations, that we're always talking to ourselves and we're talking to the choir, but sometimes we need to go to where the young people are at, have them develop their own discussions amongst each other, and help them facilitate their own discussions amongst their peers. So I think a lot of it has to do with meeting people where they're at.
Thank you. Bakari, I want to ask you a question. At 22, you started at 22, but the race, I would assume, started when you were around maybe 21 or so. What made you want to run for office when you did? At the time you did, because that's just, a 21-year-old isn't thinking about running for a political office. But what made you do that when you were 21, 22?
Well, I didn't know any better. I think that's probably the best answer. I thought I was invincible, and I recognize, coming from poor old South Carolina, I'm from Denmark, where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light, that my community wasn't even growing stagnantly; it was declining. And I came from a family, from a background that said that if not me, then who would? If not now, then when? I just turned 36 a couple Fridays ago on September 18th, and it was put me in a weird space, because it was the 15th anniversary of when I announced I was running for office when I was 21 years old at the Denmark train depot. And I want to be extremely clear that, with all due respect to all the people of a certain age who are watching, but young people have been responsible for every ounce of change this country's ever seen. From the gay rights movement to the women's rights movement, to the civil rights movement. Right. You wouldn't have this country making the progress we had without young people. And so now, looking at Generation Z, which is the generation behind myself and other millennials who may be on the stage tonight, I feel very comfortable that we are in good hands, because more people need to run for office. More people need to see the environment around them and say that we can change it or be a part of the change. And we have to do something that was talked about earlier. I mean, for me, I ran against somebody he was 82 years old and had been in office for 26 years. And so there were a lot of people who were waiting on him to die, and I didn't want to wait in line. And so, I'm a firm believer that sometimes you have to take a baton because it won't be passed to you.
Well, it's a very powerful statement that you would have to take the baton. I look at young people, and sometimes those who are older may feel as if, you don't have the experience, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the support, maybe you don't have the stability that you should have, and maybe you should wait your turn. But it seems as if this generation isn't waiting for anyone to give them an opportunity. They're taking it by themselves. And as we look at the presidential debate that will be taking place just in the next few moments, you know, there are people on both sides of the fence that are very, very, very strong in their views of what they believe should happen for our country. Is there anything, Sam, that alarms you about the presidential candidates? Is there anything, you know, that frightens you if they were to win?
Yes. So, you know, just to put it out there, Trump scares the bejesus out of me. You know,
I'm glad you said bejesus.
like that. You know, I've lost loved ones to COVID. You know, I, as you mentioned, worked in Mayor Benjamin's office. I've worked for one of Bakari's colleagues, Anton Gunn, both of whom have served as mentors to me. I know what good leadership looks like. And when without leadership, without vision, the people perish. So you need to elect good leaders. It's extremely important that we elect someone who can lead, someone who has vision, someone who can make sure that people are safe and that the basic essentials of life are available to them. And so regardless of who that people may feel that is, so whether it's a Democrat or a Republican or whoever, or whatever party you subscribe to, there's important that you make sure that whoever you're voting for, whether it's school board, dog catcher, whatever it is, make sure that the person you are voting for is qualified to do the job.
Karen, what would be your response to that? Based on the presidential candidates, are there any concerns that you have with?
Oh, I echo everything Sam just said, but what I wanted to highlight is the presidential election, which is 2 days before Sam's birthday and on my birthday, so make my birthday happy by electing a great leader, whoever you want that to be. But in addition to that, we need to focus on local elections. You know, presidential elections is extremely important, but it's who sits on your school board and your city council and your county council who decides if the roads on North Main are going to be fixed or not in a proper amount of time. Or, you know, those are the people that are making decisions about your everyday livelihood and your everyday life. And in the faith, if you're a person of faith, you've heard before that consistency is the key to breakthrough. And that's when it comes to elections, that's when it's holding your leaders up for accountability, that we have to be consistent as voters and holding people accountable as leaders and recognize what a good leader is, in addition to continuing to get out there and to vote consistently so that we can elect people that are going to be on the same page so that we can see change and see a difference.
Thank you. Listen, for those who are watching, I want to make sure that you share this. So make sure you share that this post by simply pressing the share button, letting everyone know that we are on tonight. We want to continue to ask the leaders and the panelists on this panel tonight some great questions that can give you answers about and to inform you on how to vote. Also, what we want you to do is if you have any questions, we want you to put those in the comment section, and we will try to ask those questions tonight before we end our panel. Tiffany, I want to ask you a question. You've been involved with one that I know of working as a leader in politics. What made you get involved with politics?
Yes, well, me getting involved with politics started when I was a youth, when I was in my teens. And that's why I know it's so important that youth are involved now. It's because they will stay involved throughout their lifetime. If they're involved, if they make it a lifestyle change, if they make it a part of their lifestyle every single day, that they're going to be a citizen and think about what they can do to make an impact in this world at a young age, then they will continue to do that going forward. So with me, I am an artist, and when I was in high school, I was embodying a lot of African American figures. And a lot of the people that I embodied, I learned from, like Sojourner Truth and Coretta Scott King. And as I embodied them, I started to become them. And I said, you know what? I need to do what they've been doing in their communities. And so I started working in my community, educating my peers on African American figures. And then watching my dad serve in the Army just really made me want to serve my country. And my mother, as a nurse, just watching her serve her patients day in and day out, that made me want to serve my country and my community, but I had to find my own way. So politics was my way, and as soon as I graduated from Clemson, I joined AmeriCorps, and I remember that Eleanor Roosevelt, she said, where after all does human rights begin? It begins in small places in your backyard. And I took that with me just throughout the duration of my life.
Thank you. One of the things that I've seen with younger people is the fact that you can, as Bakari said earlier, move the needle forward. You have the energy. If we have wise counsel, we can really make anything really happen. When you look at Martin Luther King, who died in his 30s, and you see others who died when they were very young, the thing that I wonder for our young voters is, how do we mobilize them to have the same drive, the same intensity that previous generations had? It seems as if we lost it, but maybe I'm wrong in that. But how do we mobilize young voters, and how do we, I want to add a part 2 to this, and how do we get them to understand the power of voting locally? So, Kara, I'm going to let you, since you started that, I'm going to let you finish.
I think it's just what I said. We have to earlier. We have to include them in the process and make it very plain in black and white of, okay, if you do this, this is what happens with this. If you vote for this person, then this person makes a decision for this. This is what the mayor's responsibility is. This is what city council's responsibility is. This is what county council's responsibility is. This is what the attorney general's responsibility. This is who elects this person. And I think we don't do a good job of really connecting the dots and really clearly explaining what the positions are and what they do. Because I think if people understood that in that capacity, then they would be a little bit more intentional about making sure that their voice is heard, and not voting is still a vote towards the other team. So that needs to be clear too, that just because you don't vote doesn't mean that you're not being included. Someone else is just speaking for you.
So Bakari, with that, even voting locally and seeing this, but mobilizing young people, how do we engage young people? Like, for example, more older individuals are on Facebook. You have younger who are on IG. And so if we could have the same conversation, but it's as if we're having a conversation, but some people are not in the room. Okay, so where do we have to go to touch young people to vote? Because I don't know if the older generation understands that. And I think there is a gap. I think the conversation is happening, but I think there's a gap. And I'll tell you this, can't remember the organizer, but we had the Million Man march, and can't remember the young man who put it together, but being there, he asked me to give a few words there, and I looked around and I just saw the energy of all of the young people. There's like, we did it, and me being 42, looking at them do it, there were so many things running through my mind. One was, I was so happy that they were happy for what was happening. The second side, the flip side of it was this, and I didn't have this conversation with them. It was, but how many of these young people are registered to vote? How many of them are actually going to go to the polls? Bakari, as we look at young people protests all over the country, really, and even locally, do you think that the next generation of voters are going to be probably responsible for who wins this race?
I mean, I think to a certain degree. I mean, I don't want to delve too deep into the political analysis on who's going to win the X's and O's. I don't want to say that your previous question was, I don't want to come in your church and say your previous question was wrong, but I do want to push back on it just ever so gently.
Listen, not a problem at all.
Because I think it's unfair to compare what we have going on with the generation of today versus those generations of yesterday. And I think the unfairness comes in the fact that if you count 10 Black folk above the age of 65 today, if you bring them up to the altar, to the front of your church, all 10 of them will tell you how they marched with King, when in all honesty, less than one of them was actually there. See, protest is extremely messy. And leadership is not something that we always have in our communities. I tell young people all the time, sometimes you're going to be out there by yourself, right? And we need to empower young people, because in our communities, we have this Messiah complex where we are just waiting on the next great Martin, Malcolm, or Rosa to come, instead of empowering young people and letting them know that the leader that they're waiting on is right there, right? That you are the person that we are, quote unquote, waiting on. So that's first. I just want young people to feel empowered and not, I don't want to frame it as if there was a generation who came and all of them were activists and they did that. No, there were some who had courage and who led. And we're going to need to have and maintain that same level of leadership today. To your second question, I think this is a really, really important question, which is how do you mobilize? This might be the most important question that the four of us answer today. And I'm interested to hear how my fellow panelists who, in my last 2 years, I've been, trying to be a dad and take care of a family. So, and I can honestly say that they are probably more in tune with what's going on around the community than I am. So I'm interested to hear their thoughts as well. But I think that the number one thing we have to do to empower young people is to shut up and listen. For far too long, people want to have conversations with us, but conversations go both ways. Like there's no such thing as a conversation where you talking at me, but I do need you in the barbershop listening and understanding what our concerns are. At 21 years old, having student loan payments or trying to do everything this country's asked us to do. And then when I do it, I pay $2,400 a month in student loans today. That's a nice house payment. That's what I pay in student loans today. You want to go out and get married and have a car, but you're burdened by all this debt. You think about the normal things that we deal with, just the same biases, the state-sanctioned racism, the institutionalized oppression. People want to talk to you about that. Not only that, they want to tell you not just about criminal justice reform, because a lot of times white folk, they only think we care about criminal justice reform, but we want to know how we can actually become self-sufficient, how we can go out and chant those old terms of Black power, where we're talking about Black economic power, where we're talking about Black political power. And there's just so much, especially young women of color have to say today, that the number one thing we can do, especially from a generation who is a generation older than all of us participating in this panel, is sometimes you just have to listen. And I think you would be surprised by the stories we have to tell, by the struggles we have. I think you'd be surprised by the disengagement that we feel with this political process. But the motivation we have every single day to make our communities better. And we just have to make sure that we match those things, that motivation, with understanding. And I think you'll have a community that flourishes and a community that votes.
Sam, you want to jump on that?
I'm just going to echo what the young father just said. I think kind of going back to Kara's point, there has to be a conversation where we engage these voters, these young voters, where we explain to them, for example, what does your local solicitor do? But at the same time, we also have to have a conversation where that same conversation has to be a listening session where we understand what their issues may be with that solicitor, right? And so I think there's a need for there to be back and forth. There's a need for policy to come out of those conversations that matches what those issues are. And I think right now the challenge is a lot of times the policy that comes out of those conversations does not reflect what young people are worried about and concerned about.
Even with that, I was reading a book by Reniqua Allen. It was All a Dream, and in the book she shares so many multiple stories of young people who are struggling. I remember going to school and, in my ignorance, maxing out on every student loan I could get because I wanted the big refund check, right? And so you could go to the outlets and you could buy clothes and splurge and all this other stuff, never thinking about that I would have to pay that money back, after, thank God I don't have $2,400 a month. I'm close, but not that high. And we'll be praying for Bakari in that. But seriously though, when you look at that $2,400 a month, mine is maybe like $1,500 or so, something like that, with me and my wife together. But you look at that and the amount of money that we invest back into the loan, back paying the loans, how that holds us back from being able to finally receive some level of financial freedom. So by the time we have released ourselves of that debt, we're looking close to retirement, some people, right? And so how do we set up the next generation? Because in the book, she was saying that many young people were just thinking about not even continuing their education because what was the use? Okay, Sam, what you got? You want to jump on that?
So, and I don't know Bakari would agree with this, but most of the folks I went to law school with, they didn't have to pay for law school themselves, right? Their families, their parents, somebody else was covering law school, right? And so when you start having that conversation, that exact conversation that you had, how do we set folks up for the long term, right? If you're sitting here making a $2,400 a month payment or a $1,500 a month payment, that factors in what kind of mortgage you're going to get, what kind of small business you're going to start. All of those things. So, from a policy standpoint, I think we have to have that conversation that Bakari alluded to, so that we can say, all right, Mr. Elected Official, Mrs. Elected Official, does it behoove you more for me to make the student loan payment, or for me to reinvest in my community and have the ability to be able to be a productive citizen, or be free from the student loans? And so I think that's the question that we have to, as it relates to that specific policy issue. But just in general, we've got to have those types of conversations. And right now, it's a one-way street.
Right.
So you're saying, right, it's a one-way street. What could those who are in office, as Bakari said earlier, who are doing the talking, what could they do? What could we set up that maybe they could walk into a room and be on the listening side instead of the talking side?
Well, I would say right now during the pandemic, it's kind of hard to do that because we have less face-to-face interactions. But I will say in the, I guess, after pandemic life, we can go to the barbershops, continue to go to the barbershops, to the hair salons, to their favorite hangouts, right? Meet them where they're at, like I was saying earlier, and not just listen to them, but have them involved in developing the policy. You can guide them through that process. And I think with them having a sense of ownership, then that will help drive them to the polls, and then they will inspire their peers and everyone else to come to the polls with them.
Thank you. Kara, now you're teaching at Columbia College, and so you're seeing these young college students come in and financial aid and student loans. So what do we need to do to help the next generation as relates to that financial entanglement?
Bakari hit a sore spot. My testimony is I owe more in student loans than I owe on my home. And, that's a mouthful, that I can buy another house on how much I owe in student loans. Right. And as my students come in, that's a conversation that I have with them about financial aid and what that looks like. And the majority of my students I know are pulling out loans to be there. There are a lot of first generation students who have no clue, who they're just there. And that's all, it's just them. So they need assistance with food and clothes and everything else. They're just there to get an education. So for me, what my personal journey with them is just educating them on the process and making sure, the classes that they're taking make sense for them, that they're not taking the extra money. I know it looks and sounds good, but working through college and that kind of thing, and advocating for yourself or finding someone to advocate for you in that financial aid office, because sometimes there's funding and money available, and if you don't ask the right questions, you might miss out on that opportunity. But that's in life when it comes to politics and different resources in general. Going back to what Sam said earlier about, how our communities, sometimes we get left out or we're overlooked or underserved.
Okay, so I'm constantly hearing we're overlooked and not being served. So let's say you had an audience right now of decision makers who could move the needle forward if you could tell them what was wrong. What would you all say? I'm going to start with you, Tiff.
Oh, wow. Start with Sam.
Sam, I'll start with you.
I'm going to steal what Bakari said earlier. Listen.
No, but listen to what? What would you say?
So I would say you need to get a cross-section, right? So you need a representative sample of young folks who, are just across the spectrum, and hear what those issues are, right? So, you need to have folks in the room who can make sure that regardless of policy, right? I think some of the part of the challenge that we have is that we're a very monolithic society. We want to focus. Right now, everybody's dangling out student loan forgiveness, and you even got Trump talking about it, and that's one thing that's cool, but that's not the issue, right? There are lots of the issues that we have to deal with. So I would say making sure that you can have a very broad discussion with those individuals who are young. It needs to be, your 15-year-olds. It needs to be 18-year-olds. It needs to be your 21-year-olds. One thing I would back up and say on the education part of the discussion too is we need to make sure that we're talking to folks before they become voters, right? So before they take out the debt, we need to have guidance counselors telling these young folks, all right, instead of going to the four-year institution, here's some opportunities to do bridge programs in two-year institutions. Let them know all the different options that are available to them. So I think that's what the conversation needs to look like. It needs to be very, very diverse in individuals, but also diverse in policy as well.
Thank you. So we just got a question online. Bakari, I'm going to give this to you. It says, what can we do to address the issue of people not wanting to vote for either party? There is such a gap between how the people feel and what each party represents. Did it ever occur that people are not voting because they simply don't see a party that represents them?
Oh, of course, man. I felt that in 2014 after I got beat for lieutenant governor. I spent about 6 months thinking about the fact I got 42% of the vote. And all I could think about was the fact that I didn't give people a good enough reason to come out and vote for me. I mean, people, we always want to say, oh man, people should just show up to vote anyway because people died for it. Well, people don't respond to that. You got to give people a reason to vote for you. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity with Black voters to give people a reason to vote for you. I mean, I've had this conversation with Vice President Biden and my good friend Kamala Harris. And, we talk about the Black agenda, Black equity agenda, a Black vice president coming through COVID where Blacks are disproportionately dying. And we talked about a Black Supreme Court justice. Those things are very tangible. Those things are stories that have to get out to give people a reason to vote for you. People aren't just going to come out there and vote against you. Now, I also want to answer the last question that you just asked about, if I may, just for 30 seconds to a minute.
Oh, take time.
So if there were a group of policymakers who represented South Carolina who were sitting in front of us today, I would ask questions in the form of finding solutions like, why do we still have a corridor of shame where kids go to school and their heating and air don't work, where their infrastructure is falling apart? Why are teachers in South Carolina overworked and underpaid, right? Where they have to literally walk out of classrooms and protest on the state capitol just for you to hear them and see them? Why do we have communities like the one I'm from in Denmark where you don't have potable water, where people literally have to bottle water and we have to do water bottle handouts in 2020? How do you recruit industry to communities like that where you have poor schools and you can't drink the water? Why do we still have food deserts where you can't go 2 to 3 miles and have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and then wonder when you compound that with the fact that we're losing our rural hospitals left and right? You compound that with the pandemic, no wonder we're dying at disproportionate rates. And so I think that when you talk about these ills, this is things that we're going through right now in South Carolina, in Williamsburg County, Bamberg County, Orangeburg County, Richland County. I mean, these are serious concerns. Why do senior citizens who come to your church have to make the decisions about whether or not they're going to get their prescription drugs or pay their utility bills, right? These are real questions that people are asking themselves of elected officials, and those are the questions that we have to answer. Those are policy issues that we can come up with. And, if we want to talk about the coast and climate change, we can do that as well. But those are very tangible issues that I just ran off, the systemic injustices and oppression that we have in our communities. And Sam might chuckle when I say this, but for about 30 years, things simply haven't changed. And so that is one of the biggest problems. And when you see people and you talk about young people and they grow up in, like, you take a kid who grew up and went to Blackville Hilda, or went to Calhoun County, or went to Keenan, and they haven't seen anything change in their community, then no wonder they don't want to play a role in the process. And so I think that those are the questions that we have to be asked. Now, I don't know how many elected officials are sitting in that room while you ask those questions, But that's on them. That ain't on me.
Yeah, and I've said this before, and I had to come back and apologize for it. But one of my frustrations has been how during the election season, everyone wants to call and come and do the parade wave, and I'm running for office, which I do not have a problem saying that we have someone running for office. I have no problem. The challenge I've had is that you rarely have them to ever reach back to say, hey, Pastor, what's going on in the community? Or I am doing something and I'm needing your support. It never comes, I haven't seen it come back, and local or national. And we have to figure out how to make that connection. Of course, people could say you could hold their feet to the fire. You could have to figure out ways to do that. But as you said, there are real issues when you're looking at the pandemic, when you're looking at people dying at a very high rate, you're looking at students going back to school, and it's becoming, I think, at the end of the day, about the dollar. It's about the dollar, not about the life. And so we have to get back to things as normal. We have to get business going on as usual. And so it's as if we are putting people's lives on the line just for the sake of the dollar. And it's interesting to see this, and looking at the next generation, looking at what they're up against, looking at policies that are being passed. We have to make sure that we're doing something for the next generation. And as you said, I grew up in rural Berkeley County. My graduating class was 120. Last graduating class from St. Stephen High School before they consolidated to make it Timberland. And it took 4 years for the Timberland to actually become a school, because you put 3 rival schools together in one school, you're going to have fights for 4 years because you got to get all of the freshmen out of there before everybody feels like that's their school. But are we looking at the future? I think the reason why I want to have this discussion is because I don't think you have a voice. Or not that you don't have a voice. I don't think we're listening. And it's the same thing in the church. I see it in the community, and it's that we don't think about next until next becomes now. And we have to make sure that we do that. Someone asked,
Real quick.
Sure.
What I would say to that too, though, is what I love about this generation that's coming behind us is they don't care.
Yeah.
They like,
ready.
hey, bruh, we here.
Get ready.
Right? All the manners, kind of what Bakari was saying earlier about the 82-year-old who was held a seat prior to him. They knocking on the door, like, bruh, I don't, hey, Mr. Mayor, I know, it was great for you to come to church, 3 years ago when you were running, but we ain't seen you in a minute. How about you come out? How about you stop by? We got such going on at the church. We know you up, you're not up for another year, but we expect for you to come. And that's what I like about this upcoming generation. They demand it.
Like what Kara was saying, we create our own opportunities. We're not going to sit here and wait for the opportunities to come. We create it ourselves. Like Shirley Chisholm, she said, if you're not invited to the table, bring your folding chair. So that's what this Generation Z, that's what they're doing. They're bringing their folding chairs, and they are not waiting.
A good buddy of mine told me once, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And I think at this point we got to make sure that we are.
See right.
Yeah, sorry, Antoine. And
let me chime in real quick if you don't mind. You quoting C-rightisms. That's funny. But let me also just give you, in every ounce of humility that I have, just the biggest compliment and warmest thank you. And the reason being is because I wanted to do this event for a particular reason, that it was a Black church in my community doing something like this and not shying away from the moment and filling in the gap and having courageous, challenging, difficult conversations. That doesn't always happen. And the funny thing is, people always want to say, they like, when is your generation going to step up? And when are y'all going to do this? And when are y'all going to do that? And I'm always like, so when is the generation of church going to step up? And when they going to do this? And when they going to do that? But the fact that you're willing to have these conversations, this is a step with us. This is a step, and it's going to take an entire community to build community. And you stepping in this gap, and you taking this leadership role, and you allowing us to voice our opinions, our criticisms, our concerns, our thanks, all of those things cannot be overlooked on a night like tonight. And so I just wanted to say that before the night got away from me.
No, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on, and I do know that you took time out of your busy schedule to be with us tonight, and I know you have to transition to something else that you have to do, and so just in case Bakari has to sign off before we get to the next question, we want to say thank you for being with us this evening. We have another question. Why are we asked to vote for people for the sake of voting? They're not even representing our needs. Kara, you got that?
I'm happy to take that on to some extent, and certainly everyone else feel free to chime in. One, if you're voting for somebody that you don't like, let me push back on that a little bit. What is it that you don't like about that person, right? As I mentioned earlier, individuals and in this society, there's a big push for monolithic thinking, right? You may not like one policy issue that person has, but does that mean that you don't like every other policy issue that person has? I think one of the big challenges for voters is making sure that you are completely educated when you step into the booth, right? Now, with that being said, you may have done your homework and still not like anything that person stands for. There may be a reason why you're voting for that person still, right? If it's an election, Bakari mentioned, and you guys talked about the two-party system before, but if you've got a Republican who is further away from your principles than you care for, and likewise, it might be a Democrat who, to each his own. But if you are if you have someone who is further away than your principles, then you may be voting for what you quote unquote have the lesser of two evils, right? Now, so we can go back to 2016 and Hillary Clinton versus Trump. Looking back at that today, would you rather have Hillary Clinton or Trump?
Gotcha.
And I'd like to say something
Sure.
as well. So I think we forget too that after voting, there's still accountability for these elected officials. So it's not like you just cast your vote and then you have to wait until the next 4 years in order to make your voice heard. You could still, even if your favorite candidate was chosen as the president or a representative or what have you, you still have the opportunity to advocate for your issues that you care about with this person who you elected or who you have voted for. So it's not over. I think that people don't understand that accountability is something that they can continue to, put pressure on with the candidates.
Last question. We're going to let you go because we're going to transition. We want to be done before 7:50. Someone asked, Kara, you mentioned about educating people on the voting process and the political process. As an educator, what do you think is the best way to educate people on this political process?
Well, first, I think it goes back to what we've been talking about first, is having dialogue, which is two people. So listening, asking them their questions, asking them what do they know about this political process. And then from there, kind of teaching them and explaining and going on. So asking them, well, what do you think November 3rd is all about? What does that mean to you? How do you relate to that? What have you heard about it? Why is it important to you? Is it important to you? And from there, kind of working backwards. So when I'm working with a student or something like that on a new subject, I ask them, okay, so what is it that you know about it? And then let's build upon that. And I think if you start the conversation from there, meeting them where they're at, knowing what they know, and then but just informing them and educating them and filling in the gaps for them, and assisting them and connecting the dots, then that makes it more realistic to them and more, okay, I get it and I see why I am important and why I'm a part of this process.
Let me tell you where not to learn from.
Gotcha.
That's sometimes easier. Y'all got to stop getting your news off Facebook. Stop following people on Twitter and thinking they the gospel. And, too much cable news is bad for your health. Now, you can watch a little CNN. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But too much cable news is bad for your health. So definitely, y'all got to stop getting your news off Facebook. Yeah, I can tell you where not to learn about the process.
And read the whole entire article.
Oh, man, people read headlines and drive me crazy. They don't read nothing. They don't read nothing in the body of the article. They just read the headline.
The headline.
They'll read the comments.
No, I appreciate that. I want to do this, and so we're going to conclude with this, Bakari, because I know you you have to transition. If you could just, what would be your last statements tonight? 60 seconds. What you would want the audience to know.
No, I mean, I don't even really need 60 seconds. I'm a young father. I know Sam is as well. And I tell people all the time, my twins and my 15-year-old daughter deserve a country better than the one they live in today. And so that's my motivation that keeps me going. That's first. Second, I mean, I think the people, it's an interesting saying. I think that people sometimes underestimate the power. We have like two groups. They underestimate the power of prayer. And then we got a group that thinks all they got to do is pray, right? We got to find that middle ground because we know faith without works is dead. So I always make an ask. I don't ask you I ain't selling nothing, but I always ask people to pray for me. Then I always ask people to make sure that they're in these streets working with me as well. And so I'll leave you with that. And then I wish I was there, and I'm an extrovert. So COVID is killing me. I wish I could wrap my arms around all of you all and just say thank you. Because at the end of the day, we are an extremely strong people, and we're going to make it. And I have a great deal of faith in that. And no matter what any of you all are going through, just know you have a friend in me. So thank you, and God bless you all.
Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate it. Sam?
Thank you.
Fortune favors the bold. So I would tell all these young folks, be bold, right? Take it. Whatever you want to see in the politics and in your community, in your society that you feel like is missing, build it, make it happen.
Hey, Carol?
Today I'm feeling like I would want to share with the people to be your brothers or your sisters' keeper. So that's when it comes to this election, as Sam said, you have to look at both candidates and see which policies are which one you identify more with, but know also when you're making decisions, they're not just about you, but it's about the community you live in and the people, your family and your friends. Even though some policies may not directly affect you when it comes to taxes or something like that, but it may affect the least of these. So I'd say in this election and as we're moving forward and as we do the work that we do every day, just, be your brothers and your sisters' keeper.
Tiffany?
I guess I would like to leave with the action item. One of the things that we kind of, sweep under the rug is appointed positions as well, instead of elected officials or elected positions. And they do a lot of work in our communities, and we don't even know what they're doing in their board meetings when it comes to DHEC and DSS and, the Transit Authority, the Housing Authority. We don't know what's going on in boardrooms. And people don't know that they can actually fill these board positions. So I challenge people to go to Richland County Council, go to their website. I believe there's still some board positions available, and also the city of Columbia. I'm not sure if there are any available right now, and Sam said there are. So frequent these sites and see what board positions best fit you and the issue that you care about. So
Applications are due October 3rd for Richland County.
Thank you. Listen, we want to thank all of you for watching. We hope that you've learned something, that this opportunity has added some level of value to your life. We wanted to inform you on how we can engage the young votes, and we appreciate our panelists for coming out tonight. Thank you for being with us. Make sure you position yourself to watch the debate tonight so that it informs you on who you feel is the best candidate. We can't tell you who to vote for, but we need to make sure that we put the right person in place. And I will say this, no matter who wins the presidency, neither one is a savior. There's only one who saves. And so we want to make sure we understand that. So listen, I want you to have a great night. Pray that you have a wonderful night with your family, and we'll see you soon.